Okay, thanks everybody for joining us. This is one of the videos that we're doing for Startup U, and I have with me today Mark Diaz Truman. He's a co-founder of Magpie Games, which has produced the role-playing game Last Best Hope and The Play is the Thing, which were both successfully funded on Kickstarter. In addition to his work with Magpie Games, he's also an educator as well as a promoter of indie games, usually as a speaker and organizer of the Mischief at Indie Plus Games Night. One of his projects includes the Fate Codex, which he is funding through Patreon. For people who have not heard of Patreon before, it is a subscription-based crowdfunding service where patrons offer pledges as small as $1 on an ongoing basis to creators of a wide variety of artistic products, including music videos, webcomics, and zines. If you want more information on Patreon, I'm going to include a link to a read list in this video. It'll be part of the annotation, so you can go and read a bit more about it later. So thank you for joining us, Mark. And I just want to start by, if you could tell us what the Fate Codex is.
Sure, and thank you for having me on. It's really cool to talk about this stuff. So I'm glad you all are interested in it. The Fate Codex is we call it a mostly monthly e-zine, which means that we publish it whenever we have enough stuff to publish. So this last couple months, I've been able to devote a lot of time to it, and we've had like a monthly issue. And in fact, I just got September's issue back from Layout just literally 30 seconds before you messaged me with the link for the Hangout. So it means we'll have a September issue, which is always an open question. And the reason it's an open question is nobody gets charged for anything until we publish. And so it has this nice effect. It's sort of like an anti-Kickstarter, where instead of taking all the money up front and then me like worrying about whether I'm getting it out fast enough, I get a chance to put something together, and then as soon as it's released, everybody gets charged. And it's a nice new tool in the crowdfunding arsenal to match projects to the kind of financing that makes sense for the project. So there's a couple reasons. For example, I couldn't do this on Kickstarter. I would have to commit to like 12 issues in advance, which would mean like a year of my life, even if I decided this wasn't fun. People would have to put up a year's worth of money or a month's worth of money, not knowing if there would be any more, not knowing when they would come out. And even more than that, I would have to try to guess how big and how complex it was going to be and fit one goal to it. And the advantage with Patreon is not only can I say, look, I'm only going to charge you when I'm ready, but I can also say what you're going to get is dependent on how many people are pledging this month. That means that if half my backers go away next month, I'm actually free to downsize the Fate Codex, make it more manageable, and I'm not committed to like a huge project if the support's not there.
Yeah, it's a very responsive crowdfunding, which I think is really interesting with the project that you've had. But I do want to mention, like, you've already had success with crowdfunding on Kickstarter, and you've got a storefront on your website at Magpie Games. So you could have opted to just sell the Fate Codex on Amazon or RPG Now, or even on your own storefront. So why go with Patreon?
I think first and foremost, I think crowdfunding offers a unique opportunity for a business or creative to be in contact with their audience at a totally different level, which is to say that I could have put it up on the web store, but I would have no idea how many people are going to buy it. I would never have guessed it would be. I mean, we have, was it 560 backers right now? I never would have guessed that was the case. I never would have said we're going to sell 500 copies of this thing, no problem, right? It also gives people an opportunity to engage with us, like, on a deeper level, more than just, hey, I bought your thing, but offering feedback on different pieces for some of our backers that have bought it at that level, or even just commenting that they're reading it and that they're excited to read it is a huge boost for me as a creative to continue to put it together month after month. So it's less about having the resources to do it otherwise. I think you can look at other Patreons, like the other Fate Patreon that Evil Hat does. They totally have the resources to just put together a adventure, but by connecting with backers in this particular way, there's just a lot of benefits to being able to engage an audience on a lengthy basis, and not like they're in one place. They're not going to scatter as soon as you release one issue.
Okay. So one of the reasons why I like Patreon is because I see creative people such as artists and writers get paid for their work, which tends to be undervalued in our society, even though we consume tons of creative products. Patreon's still fairly new, but do you think it's having a positive impact on the creators of these products? Totally.
I mean, for me, I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, and so I'm used to trying to figure out ways to get paid for my work. But one of the things I learned sort of being an entrepreneur is that that's not really for everybody. Not everybody wants to go out and negotiate new contracts every time they do a job, to try to come up with a new product every time they want to do something. Some people just want to write great fiction, write great games or illustrate great illustrations, and they want to get and they deserve to get paid for that work. So as an organizer, one of the sort of jokes I always make is that we seem to pay people inversely to their value to society, right? So like if you're a hedge fund manager, not that I don't, sure, hedge fund managers, but if you move money around, we'll pay you billions of dollars. If you help people as a social worker, or if you're an artist, or if you, it's sort of like your wages get pushed down at the very bottom. And when I look at the folks that I'm working with and that I hire for the Fate Codex, these are people who may have been paid as little as a half a cent a word or a cent a word to do what they do. And Patreon gives me the ability to pay them what they're really worth because I know how much money's coming in, I know what it's going to take to break even. And then I get to sell issues after that, right? These are still products that I get to sell down the road. So we have a very strict policy, right? It's 5 cents a word. And we think of that as standard. We think that should be standard in the role-playing game industry. It's a little less than maybe you get paid for some fiction other places, but that's what we think would be at least a good step forward in treating freelancers and treating writers like they're worth something. And nothing makes me happier than being able to write, people a real check for, $200 for a piece that they've written and put some time into. And then they know that it's going to get laid out and treated respectfully and published and people are going to read it. It's a win for everybody. And that's because I know I have the money up front. And that's because Patreon makes it possible for me to aggregate all those little $1.99 purchases into a real substantial amount of money to pay my people.
Okay. I actually want to mention for anybody who's just watching is Mark participated or actually even organized a really great Google Hangout on one of their channels where they had a bunch of different creators talking about this, and they did have a much more thorough discussion about how the other people might have actually even done this type of work for free. So it's in our read list, and I encourage people who are watching this, if you're still curious, they had an hour-long discussion that I felt really covered this really well, so I want to get you to take a look there. So you're well known in the indie game scene as well as in the Fate community, and you also built your audience for the Fate Codex on social media. How much work is involved in having a successful Patreon beyond producing the product?
Oh, that's one of those like, how did you get here questions, right? Like I think it's funny whenever people tell me I'm well known, right? Because it's like I don't feel well known. I'm just me, right? I don't know. That's a strange thing. But yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work with Fate, and I talk about Fate, and I engage with Fate. And I've published a couple of things with Evil Hat I've been really lucky to work on. Timeworks, which was part of the Evil Hat Kickstarter, and that went over very well. And I've been working on Doe, Pilgrims of the Flying Temple, which is a Fate extension of a game published by Daniel Solis, which is just a real honor to get to work on, as slow as it goes. And I think part of this is recognizing that you have to be engaged with the community for a very long period of time. So Epidiah Ravishol, who is the one of the other people on that hangout that you were talking about, he kind of pioneered this easing model with Words Without Master, which again, if you're interested in this kind of model of funding, you should definitely check out. And Epi's amazing. I mean, he's 10 times as interesting and funny as I am, so you should totally have him on to do interviews. But he sort of saw this as a model, and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. But I couldn't think, if I had done science fiction, which I love, or if I had done westerns, which is another thing I love, would I have seen the same success? I don't know. That's tough, right? Because there's not a built-in audience for it. So I think as a creative, I'm always trying to find the intersection of stuff I love, stuff I'm interested in right now, because that's different necessarily than stuff I love, and stuff I think can get funded, right? And it's kind of like this intersection of when I find a project like the Fate Codex where I love Fate, I love what it can do, I'm interested in designing for it right now, like I have a passion for it and ideas kind of coming out of my head about it, and I think there's an audience and a method of funding for it, that's a magic combination. I've got a half a dozen projects sitting on my desk where one of those three things isn't true right now, right? And I think when you're thinking about what you do to promote yourself and to build a successful Patreon campaign, I just urge people to just be themselves and engage with what they want to engage with and build slowly. I mean, I was happy to do this if we made $300 a month off it. It just would have been a very different project. And Patreon is almost better than Kickstarter for that, because Kickstarter asks you to commit tons of time and energy and resources before you even start. I mean, we spent the last Kickstarter project I did for Urban Shadows, we probably spent $1,000 getting ready for that campaign. I wouldn't have been able to do that for my first Kickstarter, right? We spent $30 to get ready for our first Kickstarter campaign. Patreon makes it so that you don't have to spend anything. Just put the idea out there, show people what you want to do, and then start to build. And people will stay with you if you're producing really great products.
Yeah, I think there's two great points that you brought up, like the idea that there's creative burnout. Like you're still going to remain an expert in games and keep game designing, but
Mhm.
you will probably want to work on other games. And instead
Yes.
of like having a Kickstarter that's going to, take over your life for 2 years,
Hmm.
you can just work on this and then maybe turn it over into something else, which I've noticed on Kickstarter campaigns when I put in money for something, I'm still getting messages about here's my new product. Come and check this out. You guys should be on
Totally.
Patreon. Um,
Yeah,
but
totally, totally.
and then also, like I think one of the things I was afraid of is that if people thought, well, I'll just put up my Patreon and they'll come and give me money,
Yeah,
but you, like I've known about you for over a year, maybe almost two, just watching you on Google Plus, and so like I've seen all of that stuff happening and coming through there. So I think there's more work involved, but I do think the model will work really well for like some of our people on campus. Like if you make lesson plans, this is the same principle that you can apply with what they're doing with
totally.
game design.
Totally. And I think the same thing is true with Kickstarter, that crowdfunding scales really well. So if you put up a project, my first project for the Plays the Thing, if you go back, it's still online. You can go look at it. I mean, it's laughable compared to what we're doing now, right? It was just like at the time we didn't know anything, so we just put stuff up and we asked for $500 and we got 5,000. Well, we closed $5,000 in the last day, one day of Urban Shadows, which is the last project I did. So it scales, and you can start small. I think one Patreon like I would urge you to check out, because I think it's a great example of how you can start small and grow. One of our authors for the Fate Codex, Christopher Ruthenbeck, created a really cool little campaign called Fate Bites, in which he's going to write small pieces, sort of like individual articles almost, just like they would appear in the Fate Codex, but of his own. And he's got 12, 15, 20 Patreon patrons. He's getting $19 per article, and I think as he starts to do this, he's gonna continue to grow. And I think it's a great example of somebody who's just trying to get out there and do that early work. And if you come to the table and you're like, I'm going to raise $2,000, and my whole plan relies on me raising $2,000, man, I would tell anybody, Epi, anyone, hey, hold up. Do you really need $2,000 to do this? $2,000 a month? If that's the case, maybe this isn't the right plan for you. Maybe you should go over to Kickstarter so you get enough money to make it happen, or maybe you should do a smaller thing so that you can build up to that. And I think those are wise words to warn people away from, well, I just put something up on Kickstarter, it's an instant success. It's like, no, it takes a long time to earn your audience's trust.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's beyond the product itself.
Yes.
Yeah. So since it's about a year since the launch of the Fate Codex, do you have any advice for us when you look back at your launch and the work so far?
That's a good. I think one thing that I would note is it really does matter if you say, like, for example, I said mostly monthly. We do a lot better when we publish monthly. Like people are very forgetful. If you don't publish for 2 or 3 months, it's like you dropped off the face of the earth. Think about just a social media feed. It's just coming and coming and coming. If you're not there every once in a while, that's not it. This last month for September was our best month of Fate Codex sales. Not backers, but like outside of the system sales, ever, by maybe double what we've done in previous months. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've been publishing month after month after month. So I think if you're going to do this, it may actually even be helpful to build up a little bit of material before you start, right? So that things go along, and to remember that working with new people, which is a passion of mine, especially working with minorities and women who have not traditionally had access to layout and design, right? So there's writers that are new that come from communities where there are maybe not as many designers. Those people require more training because they've never done it before. And so it's sort of like, if I look at people like Ryan Macklin, for example, he's been writing for Fate longer than I've played role-playing games. Like, he invented Fate, right? I mean, he's like one of the original people. And so I can ask Ryan for a 3,000-word article, and what I get is finished and polished and done. But when I bring on somebody new, it's taken us a while to develop a system to really make sure that person succeeds. And so that sort of like thinking about who are you drawing on? Who are you bringing to the table to help you do these projects? Are you going to do it all yourself? If you're going to do it all yourself, it's a lot of work to come up with a 30-page article every month. That's a lot. So maybe promise every other month, but think carefully about your timelines, because I think that's the big difference between Patreon and Kickstarter. Is with Kickstarter, even if it takes me an extra month or two, like, you still got your book and it's done. But with Patreon, if it's an extra month or two every issue, then you're only going to get out 4 issues, 5 issues a year, right? And I think that's an important thing to remember about the cyclical nature of it.
Yeah, those are really wise words. I actually think I just want to draw attention for students for this one is if you're building your audience, Mark has said this could work. So don't blog for free. Think about doing a Patreon. That might
Sure.
be an option. All right, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with us. I'm really grateful that you did it, and there's lots of people who haven't heard about Patreon before, and it's nice that you're successful. I did want to ask, though, how close are you to getting cover work?
Oh man, we are super close. I think it's like $75
All
away
right.
from having a cover. And you know what? And I'll actually announce something cool here because I do really love doing things like this and getting the word out. For October, we're actually going to be releasing a pay what you want issue of the Fate Codex as a special Halloween issue, and it's going to be a zombie themed issue for Halloween, and it's going to be separate from our normal release schedule. So look for that. And if you're on the fence about trying out the Fate Codex, next month you'll be able to download one for free and just sort of see what you think of it. And so that's the first time we've announced this, but I'm really excited because that will have cover art. We've got some cool zombie cover art and things, and I'm hoping that starting for Volume 2 next year, at the very latest, we'll start having covers for each individual issue.
Okay. Oh, well, congratulations, and thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.